Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Matt, if we could have a roll call, please.
Sure thing. Bowser.
Here.
Savard. Here. Vanderhyde.
Here.
Gilmore. Here. Slager. Schaffner.
Slider's excused absence.
Schaffner is speaking. Reed.
Here. Thank you, and we do have a quorum. We'll move on to the adoption of our agenda. And I do want to add, after gratitudes, we have a high school rep with us. So I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Having none. Schaffner?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Vanderhyde?
Yes.
Rivard?
Yes.
Bowser?
Yes.
Reed, yes. Motion carries. That brings us to gratitudes. And I'll open the floor.
I'm grateful for the music program, as usual. But after band camp last week, they did a really great job. The show is looking wonderful. There was one night where it appeared that a group of kids got a little sick, and they think it might be food related. I don't know, but my daughter was one of them, and they treated her with such kindness, and it was handled very well. So.
Anything else?
I'll add on to that. Just the performance and everything, it looks really good. It's amazing how much, in a week they can learn and perform. The actual show was pretty amazing. It seems a little more complicated than last year's, and they pulled it off very well.
I'm thankful for how the roads are looking on our campus, so they're looking really good.
Thank you. I'm thankful for all the great pre-hiring early in the summer work that we did, because we don't have a huge consent agenda, but that shows that we got a lot of that done early. So thank you for that.
And I too just want to thank the team for pressing through the summer, the hot days and the hot nights. And it's really exciting to come here and have a presentation put forward. It's well thought out. You're prepared for questions. You're ready to move forward on whatever it is so we can take action. Just makes it simple on us that you've planned and really thought out everything. So for all of you, thank you so much.
All right, we'll move on, and we have a high school student representative with us, Ava Fromm, and she is anxious for school to start because she's here and she's going to let us know some starting plans.
Well, I'm Ava, and I am here because I thought it was an all-group meeting, but I was mistaken. So I will be speaking by myself. So I don't have much to talk about because we've had one meeting so far, and we were presented with our homecoming theme, which will be Wizard of Oz, but we're not really supposed to talk about it yet, but I figured you guys can know because that's what I'm kind of here to tell you about. So this is just probably gonna be short and sweet. I'm a sophomore, so I will be planning Swirl, and we are figuring out that theme so far. We have a couple ideas, and I know prom is also being planned as of right now, and it's all looking good, and I'm looking forward to talking more with you guys in the future. So that's all I have for you, because nothing else.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to our consent items, and I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Schaffner?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Vanderhyde?
Yes.
Rivard?
Yes.
Bowser?
Yes.
Reed, yes. Consent items are approved as presented. Moving on to discussion, we have finance update with Jeff Mallon.
All the consent documentation that we usually have is in your in your packet and board book. And then the only update I have is that Scott and I were able to participate in the School Bond Loan Fund refunding due diligence call last week, and that went extremely well. Bond rates continue to drop, which is excellent news for us. If we can have bond rates as low as they are as we get close to pricing on the 10th, then we'll be in really good shape to save our taxpayers some money. So I just included in there an update of the financial timeline. So the next step in the process, and I'll continue each board meeting to keep you in tune with where we're at. The next step in the process will be the week of the 19th. We don't know the date, but we'll have our rating call. So they'll have a bunch of questions that we need to answer. They'll talk to Scott and I about the profile of the district, some of the financial information, and then we're still planning on September 10th for the pricing, and then closing on October 2nd. That is all I have.
Any questions?
The rating call is simply exactly as it sounds. You sit down on a phone and you discuss with them what rates we'll get for our bonds?
This is the credit rating for the district.
Okay.
So this one's a little different. We have, I think I mentioned this, being a participant in the School Bond Loan Fund, we have the AA rating from the state, but then we have an underlying rating. Ours has been A+, and I don't think it will probably change. If it did, it would be probably positive. But basically, they give us a questionnaire ahead of time, and then we have all our answers prepared, and then we go through all that financial data. They talk about pending litigation, growth in the district, enrollment, demographics, job market, county, all those different items, and then they take that information and then will give us an underlying rating that will then be able to attach to the bonds.
Thank you.
So, and Ian is our bond counsel, and please correct me if I misstated anything.
No, you got it right.
Okay, good.
Well, you can say that it's likely that the rating would go up. The rating agencies, they're very tough to get upgrades out of. So if you get that kind of an upgrade, I mean, it's absolutely a big plus for the financial stewardship of the board and your staff for how well you're keeping the district's finances going, because they are very tough about giving those upgrades. Yeah.
What would that be, A++?
So, that's okay. So just like everything, they gotta make it super confusing, right? So typically, it depends on what rating agency, but they have different rating scales. So everybody's heard AAA rated is the highest, right? So yeah.
That makes sense.
Triple A plus. So there's AAA, AA, single A, and then B and C credits. Typically anything in A is considered to be very highly rated, and they'll typically call that investment grade credit. But yeah, that anything in the A up is a really solid rating. And the state's rating is AA, because that's the rating for the School Bond Loan Fund. So you're not far off of where folks are in Lansing in terms of financial stewardship. So
Good. I guess that's a good thing.
yeah, totally okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Jeff. And we'll move on to bond campaign do's and don'ts presentation with Ian. You've been waiting for this.
All right, do's and don'ts. So, yeah, I'll just sit up here. Please do interrupt me at any time, because this is pretty dry material. It's also it lends itself well to conversation, right? Without context, all this stuff's meaningless rules. I'll give you guys a little bit of an overview. I will, talk Q&A. We'll hit, high points and low points. But yeah, do interrupt me at any point. If you're like, hey, let's talk a little bit more about that, or hey, I had this question in. What do you think about this specific fact pattern? Unfortunately, with the Campaign Finance Act, it's a lawyer's dream and a client's nightmare, because it's all facts and circumstances, right? We don't have very definitive and clear guidance, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into it, but we don't have very clear guidance what's acceptable and what is not acceptable. We'll talk about the way the Secretary of State's office interprets the Campaign Finance Act, but that's varied over time, and different administrations have different approaches to how enforcement should be handled. So that changes, and we've seen indications about that, which I'll get into that. At the, Jeff just handed out the do's and don'ts fact sheet. That's a great resource to look at to understand what your responsibilities are and what the Campaign Finance Act allows and does not allow. Just like anything, the very basic rule, right? I mean, the district resources may not be used to advocate either for or against a ballot proposal. That's the simple rule. If we did that, we'd be okay. Unfortunately, lawyers and legislators, they can't just say a simple rule, right? There's all this stuff that's got to follow on from that. So let's talk about, sort of a 10,000-foot view of the act and how to stay out of trouble. The act does provide for fines for violating that basic rule. For individuals, it's a $1,000 fine or up to a year in prison, so it's not fun. For an organization, up to $20,000 or the value of the benefit that was impermissibly obtained. But probably the most important thing, and this is where I see a lot of clients get very nervous. I mean, sent you guys all that small print to approve sending the ballot proposal to the Kent County Clerk, and you can ask voters in November to support a project that could really be, transformative for the district and just, awesome, right? If you guys get your voter support and can implement that project. Well, probably the worst harm above even those fines, which, we don't really see people go to prison very often for violating the Campaign Finance Act. But the worst harm would be 2 weeks, 3 weeks out from an election, this kind of a violation comes down, and somebody says, oh, the district, violated the law, right? Or they violated the Campaign Finance Act, and you can understand how the political fallout for that would be terrible when all this effort's been put into trying to get the ballot proposal in front of voters and passed. So yeah, it's that substantial political harm, and that's the context in which this thing comes up. I mean, oftentimes these challenges are, whistleblower might have a negative connotation, but it's somebody who is on the other side of the political issue and say, oh, they were advocating, or they were advocating for or against, right? You could see either one of those instances come up, and obviously they do it for the political outcome. They're really not in it to try to get somebody a $1,000 fine. Talk a little bit about the political climate. Unfortunately, we have an all facts and circumstances test. The current administration, we've seen some indication that they may be more lenient in this area than the past administration. We had a client that's doing a bond proposal, and they just received guidance from the Secretary of State. Now, it's the city of Birmingham. They're doing a parking garage, right? So we're helping them with the bond work on the parking garage. They're asking for a millage increase. That's made it into the news quite a bit, particularly on the east side of the state. It's very contentious in the community. There's pretty close to equal representation for and against. And in that case, they had somebody who complained that information in one of their mailers was not purely factual. We'll get into that test. In that case, the Secretary of State said, look, we have a clear test. The first test is whether or not there was an expenditure of governmental funds. There was. And then the second test was, were there words of express advocacy? And that letter, which is publicly available on the Secretary of State and the Board of Elections website, said that, look, we need to see some indication that words like vote for the bond proposal, or please vote, something specific that would violate what they call the words of express advocacy test. So they also provided some nice language in that letter that said we're going to limit that to the specific words and not look at it in the larger context, which was a big departure from the past administration. They specifically said, look, we want to consider all the context. If it goes out in a mailer and there's a bunch of smiling kids on the front, it says please vote, yeah, we think if that's suggesting, I shouldn't say please vote, but why don't we say election on election this November, and then you've got smiling children on the front, they would use that context to imply what they call a call to action. Now, you know, there's a lot of the same staff members around that are enforcing these rules. I'm a lawyer, so I always like to protect you guys and tell you to be careful of the worst case scenario. You know, it's still our advice that you be very careful not to have any materials that look like a call to action that are produced and paid for using district resources. So keep in mind that test. We talked a little bit about Birmingham. Why don't we spend a minute then diving into some of the specific rules, okay? Let's see. All right, so we talked about the Campaign Finance Act, and again, the limitation prohibits contribution of public funds or resources to a campaign while permitting the dissemination of factual information and permitting public employees to volunteer services or express their views on their own time. So we do have a very clear distinction here that the school district, you can use school district resources to inform. You can tell folks how you're going to use the money. You can explain the election date and deadlines for becoming a registered voter, getting an absentee ballot. All of that factual, neutral, doesn't advocate for one side or the other. You're free to use district resources for those purposes. And we put together a lot of those materials. How are you going to spend the money? What are the improvements that are going to be undertaken? What's it going to cost? Again, we'd like to see that being fair and balanced as much as possible. So, you know, hey, when you talk about the improvements that are going to be undertaken, you got to talk about the cost. And you guys will remember in the ballot language itself, we're very careful to lay that out. I think the ballot language was considered at the last,
First board meeting in July.
yeah, first board meeting in July. So you guys will remember, I mean, there's sort of, I developed the ballot language with staff's input. There's very specific language in there talking about the expected millage rate, how long the bonds will be outstanding for, what the average millage across that 25-year life is going to look like. All providing the balance to, hey, we're going to borrow this money, here's those lists of improvements that we're going to take on. There's also a distinction in that language around the ability of a policy-making official to make certain statements versus a non-policy-making official. So all board members and certainly superintendent would be considered policy-making officials. After that, we start to get more and more of a gray area as to whether or not other officials are setting school policy. But you guys should feel free to provide personal statements for or against the information, as long as you're not disseminating that from district resources. Be careful about using any kind of provided iPad or making phone calls from the offices. You still can't use district resources for dissemination of that information, but you guys are politically accountable. You can be out in the community. You should feel free to speak for yourselves. You shouldn't speak about the board collectively. Just share your opinion. It's probably, even if things were unanimous, it's not appropriate to say, hey, the entire board wants this done, right? You can direct people to voting histories and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit silly, but yeah, speak from your personal position and your personal views about the policy of putting the bonds in place. Talked about the dissemination of information using school district resources. Non-policy making officials, employees of the district who provide volunteer services during the school day, that's a big no-no. So other than policy making officials, if any other school official was asked, by the press or a member of the community, hey, what do you think about this? It's during school hours. I can't comment on that right now. Let me direct you to the superintendent's office. Let me direct you to board members who are equipped to answer those questions. Social media is another catch that happens more and more, right? I mean, you're using internet provided by the school district. Even if it's your personal computer, stay away from that. Make sure you really firewall off school district resources from dissemination of any political view. And obviously that goes for the school district itself. I don't want to get into too much detail because we do provide you guys with a lot of guidelines on do's and don'ts, but hyperlinks are another area where folks can get into trouble. The district really shouldn't use the district's website to link to an otherwise perfectly fine campaign committee that's advocating for or against the bond issue. That's considered to be a use of school district resources. Trying to think of a few other high points to help out with. You got to be consistent among groups. Campaign committees can use school property to have meetings, but you have to make the same meetings available to anybody who would make that request. They can't use, when they're here, they can't use copiers, they can't use supplies, they can't use the phones, can't use the internet. They've got to reimburse the district for any costs incurred for those supplies. Like I said, you need to apply that neutrally across the full group, anybody that would be using the facility. Other than that, I mean, that's sort of a very high level view. I apologize, it's pretty dry material, so I'm happy to talk about more specific instances. As an example of how this comes up, had a high school principal for a district that was doing a bond issue who was interviewed by students, kind of put some practicality to this. Interviewed by students as part of a morning announcements show that was kind of themed like morning TV, right? A couple kids talking to the principal, seemed very relaxed. Oh yeah, could you tell us more about this bond issue? Oh yeah, it's going to be great. We really have these needs. It's going to help us bring our high school up to date. We're going to have a great building. It'll provide awesome educational opportunities. What do we have there? School district resources, camera, website. It got posted on the website. Parents could look at it. Got email disseminated out to the whole population of the school district. School district principal, so a staff member not in a policy-making position, just a total a bad look, right? It may have been defensible under one of the I didn't want to get into all those specific exemptions, right? But there is an exemption for, obviously, for the media, right? Or a very regular dissemination of school district information, right? So if you have a regular newsletter, information can appear in that and it may not trigger the expenditure of school resources. The website arguably could have been that way. So also the kids' morning announcement show. So there was some room here, but a parent called in and said, "What are you doing? You can't advocate for the bond proposal and blast this out to the entire district." So yeah, I mean, that very easily could have triggered a violation. My joke to the superintendent in that context, I said, "How much you like your high school principal tell him every time somebody clicked on the link that could have been a $1,000 fine or a year in jail." So it's like, did you violate it once when you posted it the first time, or was it violated each time somebody was contacted with it? Oh, you violated the Campaign Finance Act 500 times. You're going to jail for 500 years. But yeah, that's an example of how this comes up in the wild, right? I mean, you can see how these sorts of instances happen. Important to educate the whole staff, to let people know, look, the key thing here is we want to protect district resources, make sure there's a nice firewall there that no district resources are being used to advocate for or against the bond proposal. Now, again, perfectly factual, neutral information, balanced information, that's always going to look good. We take a look at everything that gets distributed, and we're happy to do that, to give feedback. I always feel bad because I'm the wet blanket. My answer is no, let's not say that. Let's walk the language back a little bit. But yeah, I mean, trying to be vigilant about that. But, you know, instances come up, people should be excited about the project. It's incredible, it's going to be fantastic for the community. And so people get excited. I think that principle in that context was just really neat to be talking to the kids about how nice the improvements would be if the bond proposal was approved. And, you know, here we have a footfall violation of the Campaign Finance Act, arguably. So, yeah, we gotta be careful about that type of thing.
That's good to note though, for the board. Ian in his office, he's reviewing all the FAQs, informational propaganda that GMB is putting together, or Triangle, or the district. So all of that is getting funneled through Miller Canfield before it's published or copied at all. So we've been working with GMB and Triangle and coordinating with Ian before any of that gets put out there. All the informational stuff.
And we understand the political context of this too, and that you guys have to be, you know, quick on your feet, be responsive to questions that come up in the community. So, you know, Jeff knows where to find me. I'm available pretty much 24/7. So if something comes up, just run it by us. And that's the key, really, is that folks in a non-policy making position need to know. I mean, school district employees on their own time are free to do whatever they want. You just got to really firewall. Hey, when you come to work, you're off limits. You can't talk about this. For policy-making officials, you guys can talk about it, but you can't use school district resources to disseminate that information. So, you know, it's one of those situations. Ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, right? Just call us, get the heads up, and make sure we get it right first run.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we're talking here at the board meeting, if we're saying positive things, etc., we are being videotaped. It's being put on the internet. We're obviously using the school district's items. How does that fit in?
Right, and that fits. I mean, when you say we're being videotaped, right? It's only school district videotape and put it on your website, or is it done fully public? Like, yeah,
It's on YouTube.
yeah. So any and it's produced by the district rather than like a local TV station or public access or anything like that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So here we are. So yeah, no. In that context, right, that falls under the exemption of your regular course of business.
Okay.
So as long as it falls within your regular pattern of any regular announcement, completely fine.
Just don't like open the meeting with everybody giving a.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we should be careful not to be over the top in those contexts and provide the same kind of information that we normally would. And if it's factually neutral, it's perfectly all right. So, completely fine to have that kind of a discussion. That's not what the Campaign Finance Act is intended to catch. That's the stuff we ought to be encouraging, so people are informed when they vote.
So if I understand that we're policy-making people, we can go home on our personal computer, go to our personal Facebook page, tell everybody we know you know, this is so important, you must vote, it's very good, we got all that, and everything will be fine.
That's right, yeah, we shouldn't link to, you know, websites, we
Right.
shouldn't, you know, promote that on the school district's page. You know, social media does make me very nervous for that reason, right? It gets sort of picked up maybe by a student group or something like that, and they link to your post. You know, that opens up questions that, unfortunately, there's not a ton of history out there.
What I'm getting at though, my bigger concern is we have this huge staff here, and what is the plan for that group? I'm sure we're gonna have meetings, and we'll discuss it, and is it as simple as the firewall that you spoke of? Is that really what you're gonna advocate for when we talk to our?
That's certainly the safest thing to do, right? Hey, nobody needs to put, you know, the other thing that often comes up, and you know, again, being a wet blanket attorneys, we don't like it, are the taglines at the end of emails, right? Hey, vote yes on November 7th. Let's avoid doing that. That's, you know, it's gonna go out on the school district email server. It's coming from a school district employee. If they send it during the day, fraught with peril, right? I mean, yeah, if I said no to everything, you guys wouldn't be able to get any information out, right? So I understand that side of it too,
But that same staff member's at home in the evening and somebody
Personal
stops
email.
and visits with them.
Yep, personal email, I mean, they're free to express their opinion, you know, First Amendment
Mhm.
type stuff, right? They can do whatever they want on their own time, for or against, they can say whatever they want. Just can't say it on a district computer, can't come back in the next day and, I don't know if you guys have access to Facebook within the school server, but jump back on Facebook the next day and share it.
Yeah,
Oh,
right,
you
right.
know, there we go, right? We promoted or advocated using school district resources and a non-policy making official, so.
What about like football games, basketball games? If we're there personally in the stands and people start talking to us knowing that we're board members,
Yeah, again, that would
That's
fall
okay,
within the
no
category
property.
of not using, you guys can express your own personal views as long as no school district resources are used to disseminate those views. So, you know, that was tough because you're sort of on school grounds, but, you know, I think that's, you know, well within what's appropriate.
as long as we don't wear a t-shirt saying vote yes. we're
Yeah,
fine.
now you're talking about the
Okay.
context getting a little bit worse, right, where,
Just
yeah.
gonna be sitting in the stands.
No, that's a great question, right? Not with the T-shirt that says vote yes, not with
Right.
standing under the banner that says vote yes, yeah, we should avoid, you know, banners on school grounds and the faculty lounge, no flyers, don't send things home with kids, unless it's purely informative, right? I mean, you could stand under a banner that said, please remember to vote on November 7th. But even that becomes, and again, we do think the new Secretary of State is going to be more lenient about this, but the last Secretary of State, I mean, they were a little bit tougher about the rules. I had a school district that said November election, and they wanted to run during the 2 weeks of back to school. They had a scrolling marquee in the front of the high school building, said, remember to vote on this date. It just said, I think it said please vote. Well, you know, we really didn't like that in the context because the prior Secretary of State said, what we're looking for is a call to action. Well, on the school district marquee, during back to school week, asking people to please vote, it looks like you're targeting, you know, families in the community that are at the school. It looks like you're advocating. Now, would that have been a violation? I don't know, but with that all facts and circumstances test, and with the broader view that, you know, again, better safe than sorry, that we got to explore the entire context, more problematic than the view from the Secretary of State letter from Birmingham, which said, look, if it doesn't say go vote or vote yes, I don't think you're advocating. So that would have been more of the express advocacy test. So, but a great question. Yeah, that's why all this stuff, it sort of lives around actual real world scenarios. Sorry for the boring legalese.
Great questions.
Yeah, fantastic questions. Appreciate them. Keeps me from sitting up here droning on.
So do you have a plan for robocalls or putting something on the website, all that good stuff?
So we have our first campaign, informational campaign committee meeting tomorrow night. We sent out emails to, we brainstormed a list of people who are either leaders in the community or strong advocates for our community. Sent out invites last week, and then we'll have our first meeting tomorrow night. If an advocacy group springs forth from that informational campaign meeting, then that will be another group that assembles. But the informational campaign committee will begin to identify key things that we'll be doing strategically over the next 10 weeks before November 5 comes around. So we'll be here before we know it.
Questions? We'll just run it by you
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
the
please
ideas
do,
come up.
yeah. No, please do use us for that. It's part of the fee we charge to do all the bond work. So that's a fixed fee. So if you call me once,
All right,
it's the same charge as if you call me 100 times.
that
so.
works.
And there's a good reason why we do that. It's because it's a heck of a lot cheaper to get it right on the front end than to have a problem and have to fix it. So we just know that, yeah, better to avoid the problem altogether.
So it's good to have you on speed dial during this range of time where we've got them to a fixed fee here.
And this is
So-
the correct number, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Just gotta have my cell phone. You guys are, you can just give me a call. I mean, we represent the board, so you guys feel free to call with questions. That's what we're here for.
Very good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, glad to
Thank
do
you.
it. Thanks for putting up with, this is the test, this is the rule.
You like rules. Hey, thank you.
I'll give you a ride up. So,
There you go. Thank you so much.
happy with that. Yeah,
Okay.
glad to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that brings us to proposed high school and code of conduct handbook updates.
So in the board packet, there are 4 groups of documents. Mr. Ron Barenwald and Mr. Jeremy Verwise are here to answer any clarifying questions that you still have. The first of the documents is the high school handbook, student handbook. And so what we've tried to do is clarify language from the 2018-19 school year and then new language for the 19-20 school year. So on the front page, you'll see that if the board in fact approves our strategic plan, flight plan tonight, then we'll make those changes on the front page to our core values, our mission statement, and our vision statement. Then if you transition over to page 8, that's where the language comes in regard to chronic absenteeism. I know there were some questions early on in our review of the document. I tried to address those. Are there any further questions from anyone that perhaps Mr. Barenwald or Mr. Verwise can answer? We really were trying to orient our language to the language of the Kent ISD because that's our partner group that helps us with the work of helping to reduce absenteeism and keep students in school. There were some wonders about the language on page 10 in regard to freshmen and sophomore students leaving campus during the day, either in their vehicle or in the vehicle of an upperclassman. I tried to explain that to the best of my abilities. Are there other questions from the board on that one that either Jeremy or Ron could address? Okay. The next page, page 11, the cell phone or other electronic devices. This language is just in regard to the use in locker rooms, and the goal was to try and match board policy language with the language that was in the handbook. Now, there'll be some additional language that's coming, but that's part 4 of this discussion for you to consider.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, this is step 1 of 2. Okay, over on page 13, you'll find the language in regard to the dress code. And the goal here was to align the language that was approved by the board last year and make sure that we had that language both in the student handbook and in the code of conduct.
Yeah, the only question I had about that was, do you think it's, and certainly either way is fine, we talked about whether or not it makes sense to have it in both places or just have the handbook refer to the code of conduct so that way there's no future opportunity for them to fall out of sync again?
Mhm.
Have you guys thought about that?
So, any thoughts in regard to that? There are a number of points in which the two documents share the same message. And so there can be some value in, if you have a message in multiple places, the likelihood of someone
Sure.
finding it is greater, so that was the only.
Yeah, there's no harm in having in both places as long as
Yeah.
they're the same, as long as
Yeah.
they're synonymous, so they will be now, and as long as we remember to do that going forward. I just didn't know, you know, if we had considered just a C code of conduct for, but I mean, I certainly understand they may not have both documents open. If it's in both places, you're reaching a wider audience. Just, I thought I'd ask if you guys had considered that.
Yeah.
Just what Mr. Smith said there, we have many examples of that though, so we didn't want to change all of those. I do agree that often parents still have the idea of, you look in the student handbook, so they probably aren't going to even think of a code of conduct because it used to be all in one. So I think it's best to keep it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Do we have any reference to the code of conduct for these particular pieces? Like, even though we're restating it here, should we reference, you know, refer to code of conduct? I see in parentheses that it says match code of conduct, which I'm assuming is just the intent, but I didn't see any other language that says refer to.
It should be at the beginning of the discipline part of this.
Okay.
If it's not,
I was just thinking specifically to the dress code, so if it's up at the top of it, I think that makes sense.
So for clarity, in the last line of the paragraph, it says discretion of the adult in charge, and it has in parentheses, teachers, administrator, aides, secretaries, etc. Where does etc. go?
well, I don't think that it's been listed there as food service folks, because to anybody who would make those references to the main office, that here's a student that we feel might be violating the dress code, and then we handle it from there. All discipline is given out from the administration on the dress code violation.
That was my wondering.
Yeah.
Could it also include coaches?
It could include coaches, assistant coaches, volunteer coaches, event workers.
It says it's at the discretion of the adult in charge. So I guess there's another policy that says it's going to be administration that makes the final decision. I'm just wondering, I'm just looking for that clarity.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. The decision is at the discretion of the adult in charge, but you're saying the administration is going to make the decision, in fact, right?
Yeah, the intent of that language is those are people who could refer the issue to the administration.
So again, this is a reading. We don't have to take action. We can table that portion. So I'm hearing perhaps there's some value in us clarifying that area of the language.
I think so. I think the decision is at the discretion of the adult in charge, leaves us with parents wondering why the bus driver, you know, wouldn't let the child get on the bus, or, you know, whatever the case is, because that person, based on this, can make that decision, but we really don't want that decision in the hands of just any adult who represents the district in their job, I don't think. So my opinion would be yes, we want some clarity.
Okay.
I'm not sure though, our transportation department knows each and every handbook that we have.
They don't, they follow their own code of conduct.
just to bring clarity to that.
I understand.
You know, not to say that we're still exploring this, but I just wanted to make sure.
I understand.
But we could influence their handbook, I'm sure, if something in our policy trumped something, our policy would trump their policy, and that they, you know, Dean Transportation is providing a service for the district.
So are you, like, you're suggesting language that might look like the person in charge would escalate concerns to the office, or some other language like that?
Something to that effect, I think.
Yeah.
I think Heidi makes a very good point. That's pretty wide open and.
Perfect.
Then we would want to make sure that's that way in all handbooks.
And we're gonna discuss the cell phone policy later, right?
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah. Beyond what is currently drafted that we've seen. Yeah. So any other questions or thoughts in regard to the handbook? Okay, thank you. And then transitioning our focus over to the code of conduct. So with that, again, some minor changes in regard to the language around values, vision, and mission. We had the language on page 10 in regard to the dress code. We'll make sure that both the language from the handbook and the language from the code of conduct are matching. Then on page 12, there were some questions in regard to the cheating and plagiarism language, and wondering if maybe Mr. Barenwald or Mr. Verwise could just speak to the origins of that and why we're looking to add that to the code of conduct.
Can you just refer to what specifically with the languages that there are questions around?
Sure. I can just hand it to you. There you go. And I think when we spoke, Jeremy, back in July, that was, you were referencing that is maybe coming out of the PLCs or the departments.
Yeah, I believe that's the question really comes in on the change is really, I believe, the third bullet. The student must earn credit resulting in a 1.0 GPA for the class that the student passes the final exam with 78% or better, which matches the excessive attendance policy piece along with the summer school piece. So I think it has to do with students that basically at least have had a second or third time of plagiarism, and trying to deter that other than just loss of credit on the assignment continually.
Have you noticed an uptick in plagiarism? Like, is that a big problem that we're having right now?
As I'm trying to remember back to, and I don't think this was necessarily so much a change in policy, it's just trying to bring that same cohesiveness across the entire handbook. So that policy, you know, I know it's part of our departmental policies as well as in the athletic piece. And not so much that there was an uptick in cheating, and we had you know, I don't remember, 6, 7 cases,
Sure.
you know, where we had to bring this. But just when you go, when you're working through that process with the student and with the parents, making sure that all that information is in the handbook and in the code of conduct, as opposed to trying to search for it all over the place. So just making sure that we had all the information in that one spot. Was the goal there.
I would say though, trending over the last 12 years, there has been an uptick in the repetitiveness by an individual. It used to be more, this might happen, especially in the writing of a paper, even though the English department gives a full explanation of it, possibly as a model that brought them up short potentially on a draft right, but then it's still there, and then it usually has gotten corrected, you know, because one incident of that, of losing a grade on an assignment, typically had taken care of it. But I would say in the last 2-3 years, there has been more incidences of that being a repetitive nature by, you know, 2 or 3 individuals in that sense. And it's obviously, as you move on to a potential post-secondary college or university education, an even much more severe consequence.
Absolutely.
So all of that is just a new portion in the handbook, trying to identify specific steps we'll take in the event that somebody is plagiarizing. I mean, really, that's all we've done, is added specific terms as to how we take care of it.
It's not defining it or.
Right, so it's I think it's great. You just add it and everybody's on the same page and there's no question what will happen, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a student, everybody knows what the stance is. All right.
And then the other section was on page 19. There were some questions in regard to under the possession, use, sale of tobacco section. Any student grade 9 through 12 who violates the use or possession of tobacco products, e-cigarette, vape pens, or paraphernalia policy will be prohibited from attending school dances for 1 calendar year. So there were just some questions about
The why.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
the why mainly, just,
So-
it doesn't seem like it's anywhere else.
So the vaping issue is one that has grown exponentially. It's a large problem. And so when we look at sort of what tools do we have in our toolbox to address this, outside of, you know, increased suspensions, we obviously want to avoid if we can all, you know, we want kids at school. And so this was an idea that as I was having conversations with other assistant principals around the county, and every school is finding the same issue. This is one that Comstock Park implemented this past year and just raved about the effects. You know, in terms of those pressure points that really are going to motivate kids to make change. He said that the loss of dances has done more to impede the use of tobacco products in school than anything else they've tried. With the additional benefit, it doesn't cost anything in terms of the education. So that's where that idea came from. We're just trying to influence change to the best that we can in positive ways.
Say there's a kid who is vaping who couldn't care less about dances, and so they keep vaping because who cares? Is there then a follow-up?
Yeah, this is
that?
not a replacement of the rest of our disciplinary policies. This is just an addition to.
Gotcha.
And we're trying to do some proactive pieces. We've got an agreement with Cherry Street, so some chemical substance assessment programs are done too, that is often referral and part of our, senior moment here. Restorative justice practices, thank you. Did turn 50 this summer, so I'm a little credit here. But we're also trying to, or we will be looking at some other pieces with the vaping part. Stacy Bosco and the community folks are going to start looking at some other aspects of it. So
great, because there's a
Good.
lot of misinformation out there, and my teenagers will argue with me that it's okay, vaping's okay, it's better than smoking.
Popcorn moment.
No, and they don't listen to me, so.
So is the school dance, can we identify that as something more students attend than any other event? I mean, really, you're trying to hit the biggest number that you can, right?
Mhm.
I mean, is attendance at a sporting event, is that attended equally or lesser?
No, I mean, in terms of the students' priorities and their social lives, the dances are
That's the
king.
big one.
Yeah.
Do we know what percent of the students are in an extracurricular activity?
Other than dances, or you don't?
I'm sorry?
Um,
I'm just trying to get something that we could apply across a large group of people. If 80% of our students are in an extracurricular activity and 70% of our students are going to dances, we have a better chance
Right.
of hitting 10% more people. And I'm not asking you to do the math right now, I find it very strange. And it doesn't mean it's bad, I just don't, I think I asked last meeting, is there a scientific correlation between dancing and vaping? I just don't.
No, it's just a pressure point. It's
That's it.
just a means to help motivate kids, and really trying to find those areas where we can say, this is something you care about, and we want you to care about that. If you have to choose, more than choosing to vape.
Is it limiting? Should we have it be a little more open? I know dances are that pressure point, but to I think maybe Ms. Vanderheid's point, it might not speak specifically to that child, and maybe a sporting event would. In that situation, would it be better to have this reflect something that's a little more vague in that sense, where we could then opt to say, okay, no more sports for you for 6 months, or no more dances, no more whatever the activity would be that best suits that kid.
The struggle we run in there though too is what do you do if they're an athlete?
Sure.
Well, now, that leads into my question of, those penalties are tiered, like there's a first consequence, a second consequence, and a third consequence. So here, it's a one and done, and my wondering would be, are we missing the educational piece with the vaping student by just saying, well, you don't go to dances, but nothing here tells me that they got the educational piece of it, but they're not gonna be going to dances. So it might be vaping, well, they're not going to dances. I mean, I don't know. That's
Once
my.
they're not
Well,
going
in
to
that
dances, they may as well keep vaping, right?
Right.
In the current, in your current handbook, it is if you have a suspension in school or out of school, you do not go to the next major dance. So that's already in place. This is just trying to expand some of that, based upon, some feedback we got from other districts. I struggle with the extracurricular athletic event part of it, not just, say we do anything different for athletes as we do any other students, because we do not. We follow the handbook on all that part. But then you also have the argument, well, what if it's your student body president, or what if, are you getting into some grayer areas in that? So this was something that we thought could be universally applied and not run into affecting a team, whether it be a sports piece or money that people have put down for activities, or someone that's been elected to an official position. I mean, it's universal. It's a dance. You don't have to attend dances. I mean, I get it. You don't have to attend athletic events, but if it's an athlete, then we have a problem.
Have we ever thought about, or the health department, does anyone have a program in regards to, like, I know when I was with MAD, I mean, and it's not the same, but there was a victim impact panel where part of your disciplinary action was you had to sit through like an hour, 3 hours of educational of the effects from drunk driving, and being part of the American Lung Association, vaping it's worse than smoking. It pops your air sacs and you can't regain those. So does the health department have something that once a month they could come into our district, and those kiddos that were caught, because there's 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that are vaping also, that could come and they have to sit through a mandatory on a Saturday 1 to 2 hours of an educational board, whatever, they wanna look at it and really show them the effects of what vaping does has, because it is glamorized like smoking was in the 60s and 70s. I mean, we have commercials on TV with it right now. So is there something like the health department or Cherry Hill or Cherry House, sorry, something like that, I mean, the kids are not gonna wanna sit through that. So whether they like dances or they're an athlete or it doesn't matter, it'll affect all of them, that mandatory, they're going to have to sit through something like this?
Yeah, we're obviously trying to have a multi-pronged approach. So this dance is just one piece. So that education piece is huge, and we're looking at not only for the kids who get caught doing it, but we want to be proactive and educate the entire student body in that. But speaking specifically to the kids who do get caught, one of the restorative practices pieces through Cherry Street is getting them over there, for a referral. They go through the education piece, they go through some testing, and that's one of the ways that we just reduce, say, okay, you got this 2-day suspension, or you can go over here and go through this piece, and we're going to reduce that down for you.
Okay.
Because that's, obviously our end goal, and we want healthy kids.
But it's not mandatory that they go to Cherry Health. There's probably some parental permission with that, or it's
Yeah,
not like
it's
a
a
mandatory
choice.
class. That's a medical piece.
Yeah, and we've had, the majority of students do choose to go that route. We have had some students who just flat out refuse. Say, nope, I'm not gonna go to counseling, I'm not going over there, I'm not gonna try to learn why this is bad for me.
Is there a way that we could make it more tiered? Because I do have a concern where somebody gets caught the one time, and then for a whole calendar year, they're already not allowed to go to those dances. So then that dance part, it means nothing to them anymore. They're like, well, I'm not gonna go to the dances anyway, I may as well keep going. I realize you have other things in place for them, as far as other consequences, but I'm wondering if there's a way to tier the dance as well, like you get caught, you miss the next 2 dances, or you miss the next one, or I don't know. That's my concern.
That's been with our current policy was, you missed the next dance.
Was the school, so I love the idea of trying to find solutions that don't impact the kids' days in school. Obviously, you don't impact their future, educational opportunity. That school that you benchmarked with, were they the only ones doing that? Is question number one. And question number two, did they try that for other things besides vaping? Because if it is such a great control in order to implement change, it seems like they would use that for other violations besides, or is it just, are they starting experimenting with that particular topic?
They, as far as I know, they just implemented that just for vaping last year. Like I said, vaping, for whatever reason, right now is the big problem in every school district. So everybody's sort of trying to grapple and find the best solutions they can. And there's certainly, this isn't going to be a perfect solution in any way, shape, or form, and it's not going to reach every student. We're just trying to find one that will impact the greatest number.
So maybe we'll take the code of conduct language and the handbook language, go back to the drawing board in regard to clarification around the dress code, take a look at perhaps clarifying a tiered approach to the dance, consequence for violating the tobacco vaping policy, and then bring that back for you to look at the work session.
I do have one more question. It doesn't necessarily need to change in the book, I don't think, but under the public displays of affection, it talks about inappropriate displays of affection. And I guess my question is everyone who will be deciding if it's inappropriate, are they going to be all on the same page? Is that going to be clear to all the adults that are deciding, okay, is handheld holding, is that going to be inappropriate, or are we talking kissing? Is that going to be all clear to the people handing out consequences and the students? Because it says inappropriate displays of affection, but that's going to mean different things to different people. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be some way that there's going to be everybody on the same page with that.
Yeah, the standard has always been hand holding and a brief hug.
Okay.
Beyond that, kissing, long holding, hugs, sitting on each other's laps in the hallway, whether it's after school, whatever, that's where we've crossed over
it's clear to everybody.
That's been the standard, yeah.
I'll cover that at orientation. I got to do lots of lessons in the hallway last year. We did hug and release.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody.
Just one more follow-up on the e-cigarette thing. I feel like it is appropriate because you're trying to draw attention to the students that this is a possibility. I think, Ms. Van Der, where you're taking issue is, it says essentially that they will be out of dances for a year. And maybe it's in up to scenario where you guys are, saying that you could go up to a year, you could lose this privilege. I think that might help with the tiering, might help, just
I can see that.
clarify that statement a little bit.
I just don't want to give my teenagers a really long thing.
Right.
They use that as an excuse to keep doing whatever it was they
From
were
what,
doing.
from what you guys are saying is you have a system in place ready where, if they get caught once, they might miss the next dance, twice, maybe 2 or 3 dances, and so on and so forth. And I think that's just the confusion on our part. When we read this, it's saying you're done for a year, where that's not necessarily the case. So if it could have something like up to a year, that might simplify everything. Just a thought. So.
Which the suspension piece is written that way for that, up to 10 days. That's what helps get them to go to the sessions with Cherry Street, is through restorative justice, we might reduce that on first occurrence down to 2 or 3 days, rather than probably a 5-day suspension to start off with. So
Sure.
we want to get that. We want to keep them in school as much as we can. I mean, that's obviously the main goal always. How can we get the behavior to change and not repeat itself again, and to stay in school?
Well, and that's key for the vaping piece of if they're not going to dances. I hadn't thought of it, Shannon's right before, they're going to just do vaping for the matter. So that goes along with that same thinking. Yep.
That's where I do like your suggestion. Now, if it was up to a year, then you could say, well, you could be a year without dances, or you can go watch that 2-hour informational video and lose 2 dances. Then that gives you some negotiation. I like that.
Good conversation and good suggestions, thank you. The next piece is the District Athletic Handbook and Code of Conduct. Really, the only changes here were to add Bill Cataldo as the middle school athletic director and clarify John Norton as the high school athletic director. So for there were no other significant changes within content other than the minor extensions of just the high school application to both high school and middle school. And this is first read, and so we wouldn't expect any action on this until, at minimum, the work session at the end of August.
I appreciated the middle school and high school being lined up. I think that's going to serve everybody well. Same pieces and parts,
Thank you.
other than the leaders.
So were there any questions on that document? Okay, perfect. And then the last piece was a late addition to the race. Mr. Verwise and I spoke last spring about the negative impacts of cell phone use at the high school. And then in light of some recent action in Forest Hills and some of our neighboring districts, he brought this back to the table, and really took it from an approach of, the utilization of cell phones by students in current practice is having a negative impact on multiple facets of their work at the high school. And so Jeremy provided some draft language for you to review. He provided communication that Forest Hills Public Schools is sharing with their students and community in regard to the benefits of eliminating student cell phone use during the academic day. And then Jeremy also went so far as to identify areas within our flight plan that are directly impacted by the use of cell phones during the day by our students. So I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Ruiz and Mr. Barenwald if they want to provide some additional fill to this initiative.
Sure. As Mr. Smith said, sort of the impetus for this was all year sort of looking at that negative impact of cell phone use in our building across three major areas. The first is the emotional piece with kids, the social emotional. The barrier that cell phones put up to kids building relationships with their peers and the staff. In addition to that, the increased, it sort of falls under the bullying and safety, the number of times that came up throughout the course of the year, where kids are taking pictures, taking video, sending each other messages, really negative impact on students, and it's happening throughout the day. It's impacting them, it's impacting the class, it's ending up in my office, it's ending up in Deputy McCutcheon's office. And then, academics, the level of distraction that teachers see on a daily basis was really concerning. And the sort of the focus, the change for me came through our work with the strategic plan, developing this flight plan, which was great, amazing work, and I'm very excited about how that's laying out sort of a future for the district. But as we're working through some of those goals, it really became clear what a barrier the cell phone use by students is to where we want to get. And so we have these goals for our students, with their mental health and depression and anxiety, and providing all these structures for them. But then at the same time, we've got them on their cell phones all day, every day in the building, and that's just such a conflict. And as I've spent the last year, sort of researching cell phone, there is an unbelievable pile of data that's now coming out about the impact of cell phone use with kids, and the emotional impact on kids, the anxiety on kids, the pressure that they feel, obviously the bullying piece, and so I just tried to sort of synthesize some of that down for you through that document. But that's what sort of drove the change, and I do apologize for the late addition of that. It's one of those things. It's been sort of in the works for a while, but then it was the strategic plan that really drove it to say, this would be a good time for this.
I have concerns. I agree with you that there's a lot of stuff that talks about cell phone usage. I think we have very limited power over that because they're going to use them at home anyway. But I also think that even with the rule, a lot of students are going to break that rule. I think they're going to have them on them anyway. And I understand we can't not make rules because people are going to break them, but it feels like creating a rule for students to break almost, because even my own kids who try to stay out of trouble, I'm pretty sure are going to try to sneak their cell phone in their pocket. Now, but I see a big difference between having your cell phone on you and using it in class. And even my kids will say, absolutely, if I have my cell phone out during class and I'm not supposed to, then absolutely take it away from me. That's totally fine. But to say they can't have it on them at all, I'm not positive about that. Another thing is that in the hopefully super unlikely possibility that there's an emergency of some sort, they may not be able to get to the office to call 911. The teacher may be incapacitated. There's lots of, it seems like it'd be nice to have students that have at least a way to connect with the outside world if necessary. Again, if students are using it inappropriately, if they have it out when they're not supposed to, they're absolutely taken away from them. But as my husband was saying, there's a pipeline, the school to the prison pipeline. he talks about a lot, and he talks about the more we make schools like prison, the easier it is for those students to go to prison. And I feel like not allowing them to have their cell phones even on them makes it feel a little bit more like prison, because you're locking everything up. Instead, I think it would be really great if we had a committee with teachers, with parents, with possibly students on it, talking more about appropriate uses for cell phones, because they're gonna have them when they go to college. They're gonna have them eventually when they are at work. And they're gonna need to know, okay, this is an appropriate use. This is an appropriate time to have it out. This is what you can use it for. This is not appropriate. I feel like we should be teaching them those skills rather than just saying, no, you can't have it, and then having them, they're not gonna really necessarily know when it's appropriate to have them out when they get to those places that allow them. Those are the ones I have right now. I had another one, but it fell out of my brain, so I'll come back to you. But those are my current.
So we're saying that developmentally they're ready come 9th grade, because K-8 they're banned.
Right.
And with the Blue Point system that we have being put in the school, that's 24/7, right? That they can pull that piece of it. That would just be a couple of things that I would wonder. I mean, we obviously we've gone a full gamut from the days of even when the state of Michigan had a rule.
Mm-hmm.
No pagers, no cell phones, all that, to broaden it out when the pay phones went away, all that kind of component. But we've even made transitions from none to the traffic light process, and then trying to explain that to students and that appropriate usage, and they're still finding ways to get that.
Well, it's my understanding it's not universally disciplined either, that some teachers are okay with it and some teachers aren't, and some teachers are just, you need to put that away, and some teachers are like, you need to give it to me. So the students kind of learn where they can get away with it, so that doesn't help things. And also, if we think the cell phone's bad for the students, then, and I don't agree with this, but I think if we're gonna make the students not have their cell phones, then the teachers shouldn't have their cell phones either. And I don't think the teachers are gonna be for that, and I'm not advocating for that, but I think that if we're gonna get rid of them, we should get rid of them all. But I would prefer more teaching how to use them appropriately and when to use them appropriately.
So our current policy, it states the same thing, that we don't allow it through K through 8.
Correct.
And then after that, 9 through 12, we allow administration, teachers to decide whether it's appropriate or not. So what is the change there? Is it just going away from that individual classroom control to now district-wide, we're not doing it, correct?
Correct. So, just to speak, sort of going backwards, just to Shannon's point a little bit, I'm about as pro-technology an educator as you're going to find. I've been pushing the envelope on technology use throughout my career. I've got a master's degree in technology. I'm very pro-technology, and if you had had this conversation 5 years ago, I was a huge proponent of BYOD. Bring your own device. It's still summer. It's still summer. I am a proponent of BYOD. And I was all about, man, these kids are going to have their cell phones with them anyway. Let's make use of those. Let's get them in every classroom. Technology is just one of those things that is growing and changing so quickly that 5 years ago we had no idea where that would end up, and now we have a little better idea. So if we could go back and say, man, this new thing, these cell phones that every kid is going to carry all day long, they just came out, and this is the first year. What should we do with these in our school? And we started to balance what that would look like. There are some positives. So kids are accessible to their parents all day, all the time, and we have some positives here. But when you weigh the negatives that we're now starting to see in terms of the disruption to education, the pressure that kids are feeling, the emotional, the depression. I mean, kids on their phones are less happy than those that are they're distracted. And to your point, like even there's this really interesting study that even when kids have their upside down on the desk, they're still distracted by it. Their brain is constantly going to it. And so you know, while in a perfect world, I would love to be able to say, yeah, let's mold this and use this. We've been trying it, and it's just not working well. And even some of the resources I provided to you there, that some of the studies are of college students. Colleges are finding the same thing, and now you're seeing a lot of professors banging them too. So it's, you know, I don't know where that progression is in terms of you know, being able to manage cell phones well and productively. I know that I've talked to a number of people in businesses, and this is a trend that you're starting to see in businesses as well. You know, corporate meetings where they're checking their cell phones at the door.
So what would that look like?
So
You mentioned checking the phone at the door. Are we gonna have baskets?
yeah, actually, I looked into that earlier this year as one of the options. I don't know if you there's a company out there that's doing this with concerts. It started with concerts where they have these lockable bags, and every person that walks into the door, they lock their phone in, and on the way out, there's this magic magnetic key that allows them to get their cell phone back out, because a lot of performers were finding that people weren't present in the concert. And now some schools are starting to do that too. And I was like, okay, so they're coming in the door, they lock the phone, the kid keeps their phone on them, so they sort of have possession of it, but they can't access it, which, you know, gets us sort of to where we want to be. It's not a distraction anymore, but it's pretty cost prohibitive to do it. So that was one of the reasons I sort of stopped on that. But to your point of where do we want to get to, I think we want to get to the point where we say, educationally, cell phones in school are a bad idea for kids, socially, emotionally, and academically. And so because of that, we're going to put this policy in place, or, you know, we're going to make this decision to get rid of them.
So, to Shannon's point, this does create a little bit of an issue, you know, if we're a cell phone free campus now. How does that work for after school activities?
This is just during the school day, so first bell to last bell.
So,
But what about
in the-
passing in the hallway?
In the locker is going to be the solution essentially. Is
Because
keep
one of
it
the
in your bag, keep it in the locker, and that's it.
Because one of the, you know, a couple of the issues we also want to address with this are the kids in the hallway. You know, we want to help develop kids that are able to build relationships with other kids in the hallway. And one of the things we're seeing right now is, you know, kids are walking out of class and they're just plugging in. You know, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the safety.
If we can. I mean, we've had a lot of different instances. Bullying's huge. Kids making threats to other kids. You talk about the vape deal. We had kids actually selling vapes while they're in class and meeting up, and I'll be here, go there, leaving my classroom to go meet with a kid. Some of the vapes we've had this year have had THC in them, that they're being sold. We've had kids text other kids from other schools to come here, and we're trying to lock our building so that they can't be in our building, but we got kids coming from other schools to our buildings. Our kids are leaving to go meet with these kids in the parking lot. I've had contact with a couple kids from Rockford who were coming here, sitting in the parking lot. We actually had a marijuana drug deal go on out in the parking lot where they text the kid inside the building and they come outside. So if we're gonna keep our building safe, I get what you're saying about something, but there's phones in every single room in the building. I mean, you can call 911 from a regular phone. You don't have to call from your cell phone.
We're still hardwired.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I mean, part of those things are, we've had kids walking down the hall when we were doing a lockdown drill, and the kids didn't even know that anything was announced. They got their headsets in, they're walking down the hallway. I mean, God forbid we have an actual shooter and these kids don't hear it and they just walk down the hallway and you walk right to the guy. I mean, it's because they're so focused on that phone. We've tried to contact and talk to students. They don't even hear you. They're just going down the hallway. We had an incident where we had a special ed kid was having an issue out in the little courtyard, and kids are videotaping and they can't wait to put it up on YouTube, and then the next thing you know, you got some kids upset. Now we got kids out of control. We had a young lady running around the building that it took us a while to get under control, and that's all this cell phone use. I don't know, I think the biggest discipline problem we had was with cell phones. I'm not 100% sure, but
Yeah, it was second only to tardies. It was 172 offers for Phillips just around cell phone use. last year, and that doesn't even count the cyberbullying, issues that we had related to them. And I understand it would be an uphill battle. I get that part. I think a lot of it's the education. I think a lot of it's helping kids to understand it. But I also know in my interactions with kids, and most of them outside school, but where I've taken groups of students like up to the UP and down the houseboats in Tennessee where we have no cell phone rules, and time again, they love that. I mean, they absolutely love the time away from their phone. It's not a choice they would make if they had it, but when that choice is made for them, they just feel such a relief.
Now, will there be, because there's a couple teachers that with the HAP policy don't want to follow it because they just don't believe. So will there be consequences for teachers that do not follow the policy of no cell phone usage in the classroom? Or, I mean, I just feel that if we want our students to follow the policy, then our staff needs to follow policy also. And so, okay, I just wanted to.
Absolutely agree.
And I have had a couple teachers talk to me in reference to that it is distracting. It does take quite a few minutes away from class time, trying to, okay, put your phone away, okay, bring your phone up here, okay, bring your phone back. And I know there's a couple teachers that got the calculator holders, and each student has a number, so they walk in, okay, number 4, put it in there. And kids do have burner phones. I mean, there are a couple kids were called burner phones in a teacher's classroom, and so it's like, I mean, that is going on too, but my personal opinion, and when I did sub and that, it's so distracting, the cell phones. And I know there's a study out there where just their notifications from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I don't even know what all there is now, but just all of those, it pulls the kids away, and especially the kids that, maybe attention is a little bit of a struggle for them to kind of come back and pay attention to the teacher or things like that. In my personal opinion, it's worth a try.
So talk to me about the technology side of it. Not everybody has computers, and I know, kids have their smartphone that can essentially act as one. Do you find that often, or are teachers using it in that capacity to make up for lack of technology?
Very rarely, and we're getting closer to one-on-one with Chromebooks, and we've got roughly 700 in the building now.
We're close.
Yeah.
About 750.
Okay.
Not counting teacher computers.
Sure.
Obviously, that's a much better option in terms of controlling and limiting and putting in firewalls.
Calculators, to that sense, do they have access to calculators apart from their phone and all of that? Okay.
And even the graphing ones you can't use on your phone. There used to be a program you could download, and it took that away.
The kids have to learn how to use the graphing calculator because all the EP testing and SAT, it all mandates what calculators are approved.
And you can't use your phone
Can't.
on those tests, so that makes a lot of sense.
Are you thinking of adding anything as far as like iPods? Because I know some of I don't even know if they make them anymore, but I know my son has an iPod it's a touch screen. It looks like a phone. I refer to it as a phone. It wouldn't be able to connect to the internet, obviously, unless somebody gave him the password, but he could still put in his earbuds and walk down the hall. He could still take photos and upload them later. Is that going to be addressed at all, or are we just going to assume that most kids don't have that?
Yeah, I haven't seen any iPods this year, so I guess I would have to
Well, 'cause
start
they have
addressing it.
phones.
If they're using an iPod to do all the same things as a cell phone, in terms of the distracting music, then yeah, I would want to address it as well.
Because
I-
even in our policy,
The language was electronic communication devices.
correct, it's personal communication devices, that's how we label it. So if it acts as that, I think it falls within that.
In the draft language that we're given, it refers to as cell phones.
Sure. Okay.
So that's, we would want to clarify.
And I also didn't put in the language, and maybe it would need to be in there, but the sort of thought was almost an assumed, but obviously there are some students who have some monitoring devices, like for diabetes and such, that use their cell phones. Obviously, those would be an exception to this rule. That's part of the medical part.
Which that is currently also the case in our policy to date. Has this been run by Neola, or was this just kind of the first step and then next step?
First step.
When we started this, there was a reference to Forest Hill schools. Can you give us a little background on what you learned, or more information on what you learned over there?
So they, a lot of the same research that they looked at, they looked at the research, they decided to make a district-wide decision just for consistency, to say this is where we are educationally as a district, and this is what we prioritize, and so they communicated that out into June, where they just, made it a district-wide policy.
So this fall they'll begin doing it
Yes.
for the first time?
Yep.
So there's no feedback as to what took place, how it was?
No, I was in contact with a couple of their assistant principals, because I wanted to see on the back end, okay, this is great, but to Shannon's point, there are going to be kids who break this and try to get around it, as any kids do with any rule. But I said, what are your steps there? So I got a little background in terms of what their handbook language looks like. Also, they first initiated, last year, they initiated no cell phones in classrooms only. So they had that as a step, and then what they found was that's great for the academic piece. It didn't address all the rest of the student well-being pieces. But then you still got kids in the hallways immediately jumping on social media, didn't stop bullying pieces, so that's why they made this next step.
So has anybody else in Kent County besides Forest Hills stepped forward with this initiative?
Not that I've heard, I haven't surveyed other districts.
The reference to Forest Hills, that infographic actually made me more concerned than less concerned, because the things that they use as references are things like TED Talks and YouTube links, and it doesn't feel very scientific to me, and maybe I'm overthinking it, I don't know, but it talks about the correlation between things, which is not causation. We don't know that cell phones are causing these things. It could be just a correlation with a different cause. So I guess what I'm saying is if we go forward with this, and we're going to send something out, we need to use better references.
Yeah, there's no question that we would do it better than Forest Hills.
Okay, yeah. Because the Forest Hills thing is not.
And I just want to kind of pile on one of your thoughts. I don't know anything about the roadway to the jail. I'm not sure what you're talking about. But she made a point about maybe we should be teaching them when it's an appropriate time and not appropriate time to use them, because as they go on in life, college, professional lives, whatever they're doing, there's going to be appropriate times to use them and not use them. They likely will have them with them at all times. I'm not suggesting I know any more than either of you, you know much more about children and behaviors than I do, but it seems like a pretty reasonable thought that we might look at as somebody doing that, using some sort of technique to teach the kids when it's appropriate and not appropriate to have it, rather than just saying you can't have it.
Yeah, that's completely agree with that. That's where most school districts have been, and that's where we've been for the last couple of years in terms of that red light, green light, yellow light policy in the high school, teaching kids this is why, this is how and why you can use it in the classrooms. Unfortunately, students just aren't able to make that distinction. And a lot of it's not, again, this is the research that's pretty new, but there's a lot of it out there about addiction. The kids and their addiction to cell phones mimics addiction to drugs, to alcohol. And in terms of the brain study, and again, these are just still coming out. I've only seen a couple of them, but the brain reaction that occurs in an addict when they see whatever they're addicted to is the same as a kid when they feel that vibration or they get that notification, or it's just even sitting there. So it would be great. Nobody knows how to do it.
Okay, thank you.
So do you have any feel for, should this go forward, how the students are going to feel about wanting to go to school? And is this going to be a roadblock to Shannon's point of, I'm going to that place again? I mean, how is that balance handled with, even though we don't like where they are right now, but we do want to support them in the journey, and we have the research and we may know, but what does that process look like to keep a joyful learning spirit within the high school?
So I think a big part of it is that education. Kids, like adults, want to know the why, not just oh, here's this big institution putting another rule in place for, you know, to make my life miserable. So I think a lot of it is, here's why we're doing it. You know, we care about you, we see what's going on. This is one of the reasons, the ways that we can help. You know, is there gonna be a transition? I'm sure there will be. Well, there'll be some, you know, kids trying to push the rules, there'll be some kids who are angry about it. But my hope would be that after a relatively short time, after that transition, where now we have kids who are actually talking to themselves in the hallway and aren't being distracted in the classroom, that those positive effects would outweigh the negative, you know, feelings.
There have been other districts over the years that, or high schools even, that have had technology-free weeks, you know, during the school year, just to try to show them and encouraging families at home to even participate and, you know, get out the Monopoly game, play card, do something to interact more, to have some conversation, and to not all be sitting there on your phones on the couches. But I don't like to perpetuate, and I'm very carefully choosing my words, this notion of prison. Because an educational institution doing what they need to do and what we're elected to do and what we're employed to do, that connection I have a real problem with. So philosophically and so forth. So I just think that we have to really be careful about that. I think there's a different connotation of pipeline to that that's different than what we're trying to say here.
I think our goal is one and the same. We want the betterment of the child. So from my standpoint, it sounds like, you know, in a short period of time, you mentioned your trips that you take, and I've done that as well with some things where you do a technology-free zone and you do see the benefits. You know, there are more interactions, engagement of the student, adults, student, and it's pretty amazing how quickly that transforms. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Would you consider multi-year implementation, something where the freshmen this year, by the time they become seniors, we are a phone-free campus?
I consider it anything.
Well,
the implementation of that,
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a building with 1,100 kids where they're all in the hallways at any given time, I don't know how that would be managed at all. My concern there would also be a mixed message. Like, yep, educationally, we know that cell phones in kids' hands during school is bad, except for you. For you guys, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't want it to come off like I'm totally against this. I'm not. I just have concerns about it. But also, there's students that have like dual enrollment or the early middle college or ATIP, et cetera. My daughter is an ATIP, and her main means of contacting her teacher is through her cell phone. If she sends an email, it could be days, possibly a week before she gets anything back. But when she's working in the library, that's how she gets a hold of her teacher. Her teacher texts her right back. Is there, I don't even know exactly what the question is there.
Right. I think you're asking, are there
That's a
other
concern, I
ways
guess.
are there other technology pieces that we are providing to kids to use in the building? And absolutely. So there, you know, we've got lots of kids who are on technology and need technology throughout the day. And so definitely we want to look at how are we providing those, are we meeting those needs, not only for email, but, you know, a lot of those classes are online.
Well, that speaks to the point of even teachers using Remind for homework and things. That's a text message, and that is a means of positive communication. So that's another, you're gonna lose that.
So I think there's a lot of emotion behind this topic, but I would say, you know, if you think about our mission, right, we just went through the strategic planning. If you think about the mission of this school, what's our mission? What's our job as the board and as the educators? We are looking for our students to reach their, or exceed their potential, right, based on our new language. And if we have data, and now we have experts in the room from a security standpoint, and from an academic and development standpoint, telling us that the best thing for our kids in school is to not have cell phones. There will be something we need to manage through in terms of communication, right? Sharing the why with the parents and why with the students. But I would feel like we were remiss in our duties if we said, our kids wouldn't like it, so we're not going to set this rule forward. That would be us dropping the ball as trying to frame and do what's best for our kids as a school board member. This is my conviction, so I'm sharing my feelings. Just like when my kids do something wrong at home and I have to take something away, they aren't happy about it, but I am shaping them for what their future is going to look like. And so that's where I feel like we need to take the data that's provided to us and the word of our expert and what's best for our kids and make those decisions. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I hope you don't think I'm arguing.
No,
Because my kids are gonna be upset
No,
about
but
it.
I hear
Because I'm not.
I hear emotional concerns, and as I'm sitting here, I feel compelled to share my opinion of that. Yeah. And now I'm done lecturing.
This is a rich dialogue, and I appreciate,
Yeah.
this is why we're here. Like, this is the work of the Board of Education, to consider options, consider possibilities that are brought forward, to have rich discussion around those ideas, to ask critical questions, to seek greater depths of data and research, quality data and research to support decisions. And so this is all, although it may be a little gritty at times, it's all solid work that makes us stronger. So I'm hearing the board perhaps would benefit from seeing some additional data points or some additional studies that would reinforce a shift like this beyond, maybe a TED Talk can be referenced, but then what's the data behind the TED Talk?
Right. Well, I would love to also see a plan going forward, other than just putting this policy in the book. Like, okay, well, it's in there, what are we gonna do with it? Are we gonna do this education with it? Are we gonna contact people? That would make me feel a lot better about it, at least.
Perfect. And again, it's a first read, so this is our first opportunity to really get into a hearty discussion about it. And so this is good work. This is how we grow. So I thank Mr. Berenwald and Mr. Verwise for coming and just sharing their perspectives, and I thank you for putting your questions out there and bringing up some really good points for us to provide greater clarity on for us as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the flight plan 1.0.
So I think you've seen the final draft. We've made no changes since our meeting since our work session. We have utilized the plan. Jen did a neat job in our admin team meeting last week, where she provided us with a list of all of the focal points for each of the 3 groups. And as we went through the learning and the work together as a team, she just asked us to make a note on each point of that flight plan that we were addressing in the work of that morning. And with the exception of 1 or 2 focal points, each of those points in all 3 of those targeted areas were being addressed or were being taken into consideration. As a group, we worked through some exciting learning. And so I think it just really goes back to the value of having a focus, the value of having structure, and the excitement that can come from this work. So,
Questions?
other questions or members?
I think it's exciting. I really do. I think it's exciting, and it's just good things are to come.
So who is this for?
It's for the district. it's for the Board of Education, it's for the teachers, it's for our instructional support staff, it's for our students, it's for our administrative team, it's for our community, but it's done at different levels. So for example, if I was sharing this at a Rotary Club meeting, I wouldn't necessarily go into detail in regard to the specifics of our goals, but I could definitely share with them the vision, mission, value statements, and they could make connections with that. And I could share with them the layout in terms of how we have things broken down into academic and student services, how we have it identified an area of engagement and an area of operations. And I think I could share the focal points from the research that have clarified our targets over the next 3 years. I think that they would be yawning and drifting off into dozing land, depending on the temperature of the room, if I started going into detail for the goals. But really on various levels with various degrees of, I guess, clarifying language. You know, the language that we use may be different in a meeting of PLC leaders than I would in a city council meeting or at a Red Flannel Fest conversation. But at the end of the day, it's the same work. Like, these are the guiding factors for the district over the next 3 years.
Okay.
But you have to utilize language that's appropriate for the audience. You know, I think we could use this work with our kindergartners.
Sure. And I think that's what I was getting at,
Yeah.
is the language piece,
Yeah.
just making sure that we are all in the understanding that there's different levels, and I think you spoke to it clearly, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on to public comments. I don't have any notices that anyone would like to speak, but would anyone like their 3 minutes to address the board? And I'll run the timer. Would anyone like to address the board?
I saw a hand.
Okay, having none, we will move on to action items. And I'm going to motion, based on the discussion at the table, that we table the high school code of conduct handbook updates, both of those handbooks. And I'm proposing that we see a red line copy and a final copy. So when we do vote on it, we have the final copy in front of us. We're not voting on a red line that moves then to a final. That was clear. So that is, I'm putting that motion on the table.
Support.
Any discussion? Okay, having none. Schaffner?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Vanderhyde?
Yes.
Bard?
Yes.
Bowser?
Yes.
Reed, yes. Motion carries. And that brings us to the flight plan as presented in board book, and I'll entertain a motion for the same.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Schaffner?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Vanderhyde?
Yes.
Bavard?
Yes.
Bowser?
Yes.
Reed, yes. Motion carries. And we're on trajectory for the next 3 years. That brings us to communications, and for Board of Ed, we will be having a meeting tomorrow for the bond application, and I will be attending that. Tracy's out of town, and then Misty has wanted to be part of the marketing Misty. So we have a seat open. Matt maybe has an interest, or Jeff, for tomorrow. So that's happening, and Scott will talk more about that. So that's it.
Go for it.
Well, I was just gonna say there's a board thing happening this weekend up in, oh shoot, I forgot the name of it.
Doing a great job.
Shanty Creek, yes, lots of classes that I'm going to. Is anyone else going to?
Are you going?
Yeah, my son's home
All right.
from the Marine.
Thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome.
All right. Do share.
What is what are we covering
The bond plan?
on that?
Yeah. So we've had a couple of meetings with members of the team from GMB and members of the team from Triangle. And really just the initial conversation circling around our strategic approach to the upcoming campaign. And we've identified really two branches of our work in regard to the campaign. One is an informational campaign, the other is an advocacy campaign. Based on what Ian shared with us this evening, our strategies with the informational campaign will be more engaging from a district perspective than our strategies with the advocacy campaign. But what we've done is identified a group of key community leaders and members of the Cedar Springs Public Schools staff and community, and invited them to just come together tomorrow night to start putting some clarity and structure around the essential pieces of the informational campaign. And again, as I shared earlier, if a group of those individuals identify a desire to start an advocacy campaign, then they'll be able to start with the information that we're providing and use those factual data points to start promoting not just the message of getting out to vote, but getting out to vote yes. And so tomorrow is really an important step in our work in regard to the campaign process.
Remind me again the actual process. What ones are we focusing on first, and what is the time frame that we're doing for the building project? So, was it the high school is the first one?
Mm-hmm. So we would start with the 8-9 building,
Okay.
because then that, once completed, would allow for us to transition 8th graders out. It relieves pressure at the high school, and then allows us to move our 6th graders over to the middle school. Then we can start our renovations at Red Hawk. Once complete, we move our early childhood programming over to Red Hawk, which then frees up the space at Trails. We can start to do projects at Trails and at View as time and scheduling permits. And then we would, the last project would be Beach. And we would construct the new academic wing for Beach. And then once complete, we would move students over and then demolish the old academic wing at Beach.
And what is the timing of that? Was it 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it takes much longer than what I would like it to. You know, from the point of the election passing, GMB and Triangle will get started immediately, meeting with staff and starting to, you know, right now they've got circles on a map in terms of what we were looking at from a project perspective. On November 6th, my guess is we'll have meetings planned that would start bringing together key stakeholders in each of those buildings to start to do the design work around, you know, creating those learning spaces for our students. Typically, that takes about a year, you know, 9 months to a year, because you really want to do a fully engaged process. And then from there, we would look to start to go to bid in November of 2020. So then bids would go out November of 2020. They'd come back, we'd review them, we'd approve them. So we'd actually start breaking ground in spring of 2020. Unless there were some 2021, thank you. Yep, and then, you know, the 8th and 9th grade building would take, you know, 24 months to complete realistically. I mean, in a beautiful world. So, you know, we're moving in, yeah, we're moving in fall of 2023 to that building. Starting work on Red Hawk then in 2023. So we do bids for Red Hawk in November or December of '22. So that way they could get started in the summer, the second that we're done with school in 2023, we could get started at Red Hawk. The renovations there shouldn't be that significant. And so then it, may be able to transition over sooner. Plus, only a portion of that building is currently being used, and so we can be strategic about getting in and doing some early work if possible.
Sure.
So we'll just keep clicking them off as we,
And again,
it's
just,
like running a marathon.
we're not adding on to the middle school.
Correct.
We're not doing anything to this building.
Correct.
As far as demolition.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll make determinations as to how we want to utilize this building, once we're all done, and we have a full scope of what the needs are, and then we'll move forward from there.
Okay. Those are the facts. You guys have got that all. Everybody's good?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if Ken has anything else, or Jeff to share?
I don't know if we shared this yet, but Triangle, and Matt, you've probably seen these, Triangle has a draft construction schedule throughout the whole process. Because this kind of has to be married to the draw schedule when we issue our two big series of bonds as well. So we can definitely pass this along, and it has all the projects, large rounded dollar amounts, and then kind of lays them out from 2020 all the way out to the end of 2025, when those will be completed. Started. And the first part is primarily the A9 building, and then I think it's trails that we're going to start on too as well, right? Is that accurate, Ken?
I couldn't tell you right now
Okay.
what trails is gonna fall in line. All I know is it makes a logical sense as to how we have to shift the students in order to accomplish what we have to do. There's a few wild cards that we could start earlier on if we had the financing arranged to do it, but that's between Jeff and Jeff.
Sure.
He's the one doing all that.
No pressure, Jeff.
I'm working with other sources, and we have a municipal advisor and Ian as our counsel too. So.
Say, based on what Ian said, that sounds informational, so it feels like you can throw that up on the website.
And the whole point of doing this was just, the more we talk about it, the more it sticks in our minds,
Yeah.
in my mind specifically. I've already had people asking, and just to have summer break and, a few brain cells gone over the summer break, it makes sense to just kind of keep recapping and making sure that everybody's on the same page of knowing what buildings are what and what's scheduled for when, and just kind of going down that list. So that's all I was looking for, and I appreciate kind of running through that again.
Yeah, and GMB is already in the process of putting together our bond boards. It's somewhat limiting because we don't have this picture that we can share with people, like, this is what we're going to build. It's still conceptual. And so what our bond boards will be comprised of is just those highlights, those key concepts, and we'll utilize that with that asterisk to be continued, or with details forthcoming after the election. But I've already had very favorable responses from individuals throughout the community. And so I know that there will be key businesses who are willing to, put up our bond boards so that when people are visiting their establishments, they'll be able to see the work that's projected. And that's very exciting. We could do this on our own, but it will be better for it, as will the community, if we bring it all together. Because then everyone owns it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first, I have gifts. And it's not even board appreciation month. But it is important for you to know how much we appreciate your work each of our students. You want to say thank you? So something for you to display, put on the shelf, dust off periodically. We are changing the game. And it is an awesome thing.
Thank you very much.
You're so very, very welcome. These were the design of our friend Stan Kozicki. So just a way for us to be mindful of those things that are important to us, but do it in a subtle way. So again, we thank and appreciate your support and your efforts
Thank you.
on a regular basis. So I don't know if any of the team wants to give a quick update of the things that they're accomplishing or focused on right now.
I can't believe how fast this summer went by. And we're already at that point where we're preparing for teacher orientation next week. And so we're excited. Jen and I have been working on putting together that plan for the teacher induction, which is going to really make that first step into the Red Hawk family a good first step that's going to prepare them to hopefully shine the rest of their career. And it's just exciting to think about the things that we get to do to help them to have that smooth step.
So, lost in all the budgeting, the bond planning, the refunding, the end of the year reporting, the auditors were on site for the first day today. So just a reminder that this is audit week.
Alrighty then.
Not like Sharpie.
Yeah, right.
With Sharpie.
In addition to new teacher orientation, we have our PLC leader kickoff this week as well with administrators and PLC leaders. And I am just grateful that they have time to come together built into their schedules during the school year to impact student learning. So thank you for that continued support in that way.
And not to spoil my 2 weeks from now update, we are nose to the grindstone right now trying to get ready. We have students back on campus with football practice starting and band people here, cross country going on. So teachers are wandering back into their classrooms. It's getting very busy on our end, so we're doing what we can to accommodate all and finish projects as we go.
That new dumpster spot behind Cedar View is wonderful. It's going to be the nicest one around.
We aim Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll move forward to planning, and we have new hire orientation August 19th. Our next work session meeting is August 26th, and then the all-staff opener that everybody's invited to, if your work schedule allows, is August 27th in the morning at the high school.
How long does that normally last?
Our piece will be done by 8:15. So Jen and Matt have given me 45 minutes.
All right, so that's our work going forward, and with that, we will stand adjourned.